Welcome. Today's topic is what are decimals? And this is just an introduction to what decimals are about. And the first key thing that I want you guys to recognize is decimals do kind of the same thing that fractions do, is they show us part of a whole. So I'm going to get my lightsaber out and I want you to remember this key phrase. It shows us part of a whole. So if we look at the example that I have below here, our number here is 2, and here's the key thing. We are dealing now with what we call a decimal point. So we're used to having two wholes of something. That would be like having 2 pizzas here, okay? But what does the decimal part, so the numbers that take place after the decimal point, that's what we're trying to understand in this lesson. And what they do is they represent part of a whole. So we've got 2 full pizzas, but we do not have another full pizza. We've got a part of a whole pizza. And we're maybe not quite sure right now what this 632 means in terms of how much of a part of a pizza we have, but we have another part of a pizza. So if I draw my pizza like this, my extra part of the pizza might look something like that. So important that we understand a few things. The number in front of the decimal place is a value that we're used to. It's called the ones value. And if there was another value in front of it, it would be the tens. And if there was another one in front, it would be hundreds. And then we would have our next 3 that are in the thousands. So we'd have 1,000s, 10,000s, 100,000. So all place values that we're comfortable with. Now what we're doing is we're focusing on the place values after the decimal place. So the first place value after the decimal place is what we call tenths. So this is kind of easy to remember. We've got our ones here. Let me get my lightsaber out. We've got the ones here right beside the decimal point. The one beside it to the left is the tens value, which we're familiar with. The one beside it to the right is the tenths value. So remember that. Well, if the one beside it over here is hundreds, the one over here, now watch this, hundreds. Don't forget the TH at the end, the THS. Now, if this next one over here was thousands, the one over on this side would be thousandths. Don't forget the TH over here. So the question is, what do these things mean? So that's really important. So we learned that the thousandths, the tenths, hundredths, and thousands are the 3 decimal places after the decimal. What do they mean? So let's just flip the next slide. I think this will help hopefully show it to you. So we're used to these blocks. This used to be our thousands block. This used to be our hundreds block. This used to be our tens block. And this used to be a 1 block. Well, we're changing it now. I want you to think of this big thousands block now as one whole. That's like one of something. And what we're going to do now is we're going to break up that one whole into different parts. This piece now, we're going to think of it as 1/10. The reason we can think of it is if I had 10 of these, it would make one whole. So if you had 10 of those pieces, it makes one whole. Now, our next decimal place is what we call a hundredth. You can actually think of a hundredth as like one of these 10 pieces. The reason it works is if you've got 100 of these, it would make one whole. Now this block here, which used to be our ones value, is now considered our thousandths because you need 1,000 of these to make one whole. So all we're doing is we're learning to describe parts of this whole, but now we're thinking of this one here as our new whole value. So let's go now to another example. So the next example we have here is we have a value where we have a 1, a decimal, a 3, 9, 3. So let's model this a few different ways. The first way that we can model it is we can use something that we call place values chart. So you can see in this case, we're going to write down what number goes with each one. So in the ones value, that's the number before the decimal place, we have a 1. How many tenths do I have? Well, the number after the decimal place is the tenths. We have 3 here. The number after the tenths is the hundredths. So I've got 9 of those. And the number after the hundredths place is our thousandths place. We have 3. So this is what we call a place value chart. So we could actually rewrite this number using a place value chart. And you can see we have 1 whole. If you were thinking of this in terms of our blocks, it is like we had 1 big cube. Tenths value means we have a part of a whole. So if the big cube is a whole, now we have 3 tenths values. How many hundredths? Remember, they were just the little rectangles. We would have 9 of these. So you could also draw this out in pictures if you'd like. You can see your textbook for a much better picture of this. And then the thousandths were just the real tiny squares. So you can see you would have 3 of those. So you could actually draw this out. So what is this? What do we have? We have 1 whole. Okay, we have 3 tenths. We have 9 hundredths and 3 thousandths. So we don't have quite 2, but we have more than 1. So we have more than 1 whole, but we have less than 2. How could we write this in what we call expanded form? So we've done this with big numbers. Now we're going to deal with it in smaller numbers. So you can think of it as this. We've got 1 whole plus 3 tenths, which we're now going to write as 0.3. We've got 9 hundredths. So remember, the hundredth spot is 0 decimal. This first value is the tenths, so we'll just put a 0 in. The second value is the hundredths, so we'll put a 9 in. So that's how we'd write 9 hundredths. And then the last thing we're going to do is write 3 thousandths. Remember the ones place, tenths place, hundredths place, and we have 3 thousandths. So this is how we can write this in expanded form. The last thing, and really important, is to be able to write this in words. So how would I actually say this number? So this is the rule here, is whenever you see, let me get out a blue pen here, whenever you see the decimal place, you replace it with the word and. So don't forget that. If someone is saying a number and they say the word and, that means the decimal place. So in this question here, you would say 1. Oh, we're now hitting the decimal place, so we say and. Now this is what you do. You say this full number here. So it's almost like you're going to, let me get out my pointer, ignore the 1 in front. We're just looking at these 3 numbers. So how would you say those 3 numbers? Well, we would say 393. So let me get my pencil out. 393. Okay. Now the last thing we need to do is write down what place value this ends with. So in this case, it's ending in this place value, which is, here's our tenths, here's our hundredths, here's our thousandths. So we need to write thousandths at the end, because that's where our place value ends. So how do we say this? 1 and 393 thousandths. Well, I hope this gets you going. For some of you, I think you'll be able to start working on some of these questions. For some of us, you're going to have to ask lots of questions, and that's great. Have a great one. This is our intro to decimals.